Welcome everyone. Yes, you're allowed to clap because that will give us 5 seconds to make comments. I am Vayu Naidu and I'm absolutely delighted because for me this is the rock concert of words. I have a wonderful panel of writers and speakers and who are going to engage us with the different geographic and emotional landscapes in their writing. And with the reading room, normally the theme is to look at a particular genre of writing. So I'm just looking broadly at fiction because we're covering different strands of writing. But I thought it's a good point to start and to actually introduce my readers, so my writers and readers exactly. And I thought if I first introduce them, then we will enter their wonderful worlds of writing with a short extract of reading, and then we begin a small conversation about the craft of it and how they engage with fiction, so many different ways. So those of you who are very experienced writers in the audience who've done your magnum opus, your encyclopedias, you can still learn something. The exciting thing is this is a brilliant contemporary English writing in India panel of writers that I have here with me. So may I just start with Bulbul Sharma, who's on my right, a brief introduction. She is a painter and a writer, and her works are in the collection of the National Gallery of Modern Art, Lalit Kala Academy and Chandigarh Museum, as well as in private collections in India, UK. Wow, she's traveled the world more with the canvas or the mural than feet can travel, Japan, Canada and France. And her books include My Sainted Aunts with Penguin, The Perfect Woman, and she's also done books for children. She is the founder member of Sannidhi, NGO that works in village schools of Himachal. So when I was asking Bulbul, where exactly are you? Because this wonderful novel of hers, and I do think the excellent Marigold Hotel can just move over a bit. This is The Murder at the Happy Home for the Aged. So she covers an absolute pantheon of characters whom we will listen to in a few moments. But to my left, the place where my heart is. No, not necessarily. I love embarrassing the only male speaker on panel.
He's not embarrassed.
Because he doesn't want his old aunt or something making proclamations like this. I'm so glad for a change. Prajwal Parajuly has gone speechless. But he will give us a great reading because his books are wonderful. I love introducing him this way, that he's the son of an Indian father and a Nepalese mother. The Gorkha's Daughter, his debut collection of short stories, was nominated for the Dylan Thomas Prize in the UK and the Story Prize in the US. But today he's going to talk to us and read to us from Land Where I Flee, which is his novel. And it's his first novel, and it was selected as the Independent London Book of the Year and also as the Kansas City Star Best Book for 2015. At the moment, Prajwal is the Clayton B. Ofsted Endowed Distinguished Writer in Residence at Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri. I think I'm going to say this in quotes because we're in for that lovely quality of his writing. He says, I'd like to let you know that Land Where I Flee is a novel into which he incorporated every South Asian taboo that he could think of and decided to have a blast. Plus, it's so much fun to write a character whom we'll hear about called Chitralekha because she's a badass. Yeah. And to my extreme left, if I had a 9-chambered heart, the name...
Clever, well done.
To get that accolade from writers, ladies and gentlemen, wow, is Janice Pariat. And Janice is the author of Boats on Land, which was a collection of short stories, and Seahorse, a novel. She was awarded the Young Writer Award from the Sahitya Academy and the Crossword Book Award for Fiction in 2013. She has stomped the grounds which I visited many centuries ago. Just to tell you the generational divide and bridge between all of us. She studied English literature at St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and the history of art at SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies. Her work includes art reviews, book reviews, fiction, and poetries. And this new work, The Nine-Chambered Heart, is out with HarperCollins, which you all must buy their books. And it is being translated into 6 languages, Italian, Spanish, French, and German. And she lives with a creature that has 9 lives, her many cats. So with that kind of introduction, please give them a big, big hand. And to kick off, I'm going to have Janice read a small section from her work.
Right. Please. So before I start, just a small sort of contextualization for the novel. It's 9 voices, surprise, surprise, who all speak about the same person, one woman at the center of the novel. And sorry, I got distracted.
I'm just,
there was another
soft, isn't it? That's why. Can we hear Janice at the back?
Okay.
Yes.
So there are 9 voices speaking about the same woman, and the way that they're related is that either they've loved her or she's loved them. So it's a fictional biography told through love. And this is one of the voices. I love you. I almost hit you. You're lodged in a corner screaming at me, and I raise my hand. I can still see your eyes widen, your mouth round into a silent O as the words die in your throat from surprise and fear. But the evening didn't start out this way. No, we didn't start out this way. Years ago, I remember I see you across a bonfire on New Year's Eve, all soft and glowing, lit by the light of the flames. I'm rolling a joint, and you catch my eye, and after that, there's a million sideward glances, a small smile, some laughter, then a reshuffling of places as people stand to refill their drinks, use the loo, seek cigarettes and matches, and at some point, we find ourselves seated next to each other. I pass you a joint, and you take delicate puffs, most of the smoke escaping your mouth. You know, I wish I could say something witty or smart, that I could quote a line from a book or something, so that whatever we might share after this, however extended or fleeting, would always have this beginning. Instead, when you hand the joint back, I hear myself say, good stuff, no? And in an instant, everything becomes forgettable. You're older, I've just begun university, and you're in your final year. Please don't ask what next. I was about to, but I protest, saying, of course, I wasn't. And I comment on the weather instead, something truly meaningful about it being cold. You make no reply. It's some terribly banal conversation I'm attempting, but you make me nervous. Even if I've just met you, I feel I must appear more than I am or have ever been, a better version of myself. Later, I will put it down to awe, like you're some rare bird visiting a garden. Stupid as it sounds, at the time it feels like a privilege that you should choose me. That night, I sit next to you, joint following joint, expanding my senses into the sky. This is what it was like, I think, for explorers, perched on the brink of an expedition. You, an undiscovered continent, a land that hasn't been charted, and in a way, for me, the world.
Thank you, Janice. So we'll explore that map of the world, but now we're going to have Prajwal reading from A Land Where I Flee.
Thank you, Vayu. Just to give you a little context, Land Where I Flee is a juicy family saga in which four siblings living in various parts of the world convene in my hometown of Gangtok, Sikkim, in the Himalayas for their grandmother's 84th birthday. Now, I was sick and tired of reading about Indian grandmothers who cuddled their grandkids and pickled their mangoes and told them stories. My grandmother doesn't do that. She smokes a beedi in a disgusting way, has absolutely no qualms about puffing it in the faces of people she wants to piss off, and plays with politicians like they're putty, okay? So anyway, four grandkids living in various parts of the world, and there is a servant in the house who was born a male and became female along the way. And her name is Prasanti. She started off as Prashant. And I'm going to read a little portion about what led to Prasanti's birth, okay? So this takes place in Kalimpong, which is very close to Darjeeling, right next to Sikkim in the Himalayas again, okay? So Prasanti is the daughter, or at this point, or will be the daughter of an upper caste Brahmin priest and his second wife, okay? Within 6 short years of his marriage, Pandit Acharya was the burdened father of 4 daughters. Already nearing 60 and prone to sicknesses whose diagnosis varied from doctor to doctor, the priest was afraid he would die without a son to perform his death rites. The thought of a stranger incinerating his fat, pudgy body bothered the priest. The stranger would be some relative, flesh and blood, yes, but flesh and blood many times removed. The Pandit was afraid his cremator wouldn't abstain from salt for 13 days after his death. The image of this man sucking on a sliver of chicken 10 minutes after setting the priest's body on fire made our learned friend despondent. Pandit Acharya had tried again and again to impregnate his wife, but she dutifully isolated herself in the cowshed month after month to menstruate in peace. No child, male or female, arrived. When he had first married his wife Nirmala, slightly older than a child bride and slightly younger than a woman, those ties had been so full of promise. And he couldn't fault her, for she delivered quantity-wise. But what good was quantity when not one of his 4 offspring could immolate him? Nothing made his sick heart cry more than when he saw his younger brother's twin toddlers run around naked, their tiny penises glistening in the sun. Pandit Acharya seldom saw his nephews clothed from the waist down. It was as though the little boy's overactive bladders, which engendered a frequent change of clothes that started early in the morning, and Pandit Acharya's brother's acute poverty, which guaranteed that the harassed mother would run out of clothes into which to change the sons by the 3rd urination of the day, was a mocking reminder from God about what the priest lacked. You need to know more? Read the book. Buy the book.
Great. So, wonderful topography, actually, of this whole inheritance idea and having and by the way of having the male heir immolate you and girls not being good enough, even if they're in quantity. So, Bulbul, you're going to read for us from your book.
Mine is on a different note altogether, because first of all, we go to Goa, where actually Janice come from, and it's set, I would say, many years. It sort of goes back in time, though it's placed now. Rosie wheeled her chair towards the courtyard to look for Leela,
An empty teacup was lying on the table. Devin, the youngest resident of the happy home for the aged, had already left for his yoga class on the beach at dawn and would only return late in the afternoon. He spent his mornings at the temple cleaning the idols of the gods and goddesses and feeding the cows. Then he went to the church in Trionim, the closest village, and helped the priest to teach orphan children. The house was silent, though a few windows and doors creaked sadly, as they always had, as if still complaining about some long-forgotten hurt. Cirillo was already up and doing his push-ups in the veranda. Rosie heard him counting breathlessly. "He's still so handsome, even though he must be well past 65, she mused as she took out a small bottle from her bag and sprayed rose water on her wrists. Cirillo, always so happy and cheerful, spent all day pottering about in the garden, his strong muscular arms gleaming in the sunshine. He made Rosie's day pass wonderfully when he worked right under her window. She kept talking to him, and though he could not hear her, he looked up and smiled at her from time to time. It was enough for Rosie. At her age, a small gesture like that was enough to keep her happy all day. When she was younger, men would faint with joy when she threw a careless little smile at them. Time changes everything, and we have to bow our heads to his harsh commands, Rosie whispered from a half-forgotten poem, picking up the mascara brush with a trembling hand.
Thank you. So really, age cannot wither that thing called love, you know. I was just wondering if I could just throw it open to each one of us whenever you want to answer, or perhaps one can direct it to. I was wondering if you could really look into character. I know you're dealing with it in very different ways. We've got older people in your book, but there's a lot of...
Very old.
Yeah. But there's a lovely sense of humor that plays in Prajwal's. But yours is sort of autobiographical, or not necessarily autobiographical, but from people you know?
There is a bit of me in every one of the characters in Land Where I Flee. But more often than not, my characters are composites of people I've met, people I've dreamt of, people I've been thinking of for days and months and years. I have done crazy things like create a Facebook profile of one of my characters, you know, complete with date of birth and favorite music and one of those ridiculous "what would you do" questions, you know, that Facebook is so good at. And but it boomeranged on me. My characters came out extremely stilted. It was, and I gave up on that. You know, it always happens with me that the character I dreamt of does not end up being the character that, you know, that it was initially. These characters sprout wings of their own. They meander into territories I hadn't imagined it, I wouldn't have imagined at all. So, yeah, and I love writing female characters. I think if you read my books, you'd find that the female characters are far more colorful, they're far stronger.
Which women are.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I find myself almost becoming sluggish, you know, when I'm writing, when I wrote Land Where I Flee, when I wrote parts of Land Where I Flee that had male characters, you know, it was like, oh, this is getting boring. You know, the female characters, I believe, are more nuanced, more layered, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, Janice, I just wonder, while we're on this thing of character, you've done something where these characters are not external, but you've actually immersed yourself, and you write in a male persona as well. So,
yes, well, for several of the voices, for sure. And I think Prajwal in a way is right. You know, literature is fun. We take literature very seriously sometimes, but literature is, you know, it occupies that space that, I think what Jeff Dyer says, he says that, you know, there is that inch between real life and fiction, and that's where my writing happens, you know, and it's playful. There are no lines that are policed, really. It's permeable. And for this particular book, actually, character takes on a slightly different sort of tone, because the whole point of the book is to explore how we actually never quite know somebody completely. So just as the narrators have a certain sliver of access to this woman at the center, so do we with the people in our lives. And it happens with people that we've been with for years. They surprise us, they hurt us, they do things that are unexpected and unbelievable, and you catch yourself saying, I never expected that. And that's what people do. And for me, that's what I wanted to explore. That no matter what, no matter how we sort of, you know, try and delude ourselves into thinking that we know somebody very, very well, we don't know them, and they don't know us. And it's okay.
It's that lovely moment of what if, isn't it? And also you're writing about a subject about love, you know, your whole dedication in the book.
And all forms of love. It's
all
not
forms.
just romantic.
Yes, exactly. And in a way, Murder at the Happy Home for the Aged is also about love. In some way, your central character, Maria, she can't make up her mind, isn't it? But it's a kind of a utilitarian. How have your characters developed? Is this some people you've... I can hear the chatter in a bus. I can hear, you know, I can see these people. How have you...
Well, it actually came about because I visited a home for senior living, it's called in India, you know, when they sort of make it almost like a spa, and you pay a lot of money to dump your aged parents, and it's mainly, I'm sorry to say, NRIs who live abroad, you know, they don't feel so guilty if their parents are living in a sort of home. So I'm a painter, and so I went to do an art workshop with them. And just talking to them, and most of it was about what if I had done this? What if I had not listened to my parents and married the man I actually was in love with instead of this wimp they produced for me, you know, arranged marriage. So all these regrets, all these things, and they're all in their 80s. So suddenly while talking to them, I said, what if, you know, they do something really exciting like solving a murder? So that's how it just came up. And I plonked a dead body. And of course, my publishers were very sort of, what should I say, concerned. They said, you know, don't write the name. I, of course, made up the name. It's called something else, the Old People's Home. And all the characters, of course, are fictitious. But love, you know, does feature in the main character. And she has fallen in love with this guy who's totally unsuitable, who doesn't really love her, and he's very rich, very handsome, wears a lot of aftershave. And there's this other boy who's in love with her, who's you know, in Goa has these beautiful spice farms, and he's the owner of a spice farm. Now, if I had a chance, I'd love to marry the owner of a spice farm. So it's sort of a bit of my own unrequited longing. Yeah. So that's how he gets the girl.
Okay, great. I just want to come back to something about language, you know, and there are two ways of looking at it. One is the kind of language we're using, both to express love, possibly dialogue in getting our characters out more significantly, or maybe something deeper within them is being said. And in a way, Janice, in doing that in first person, you're actually speaking from the heart in a way, yeah? But I just want to, if each of you could tell us, you know, what's happening with language, because Prajwal, you said something very interesting when we were talking earlier about how you're trying to, something about languages in Nepal, or a certain sense, it's not just a sensibility, but how are we working through with this in English? You know, so
I call Land Where I Flee my love letter to Nepali, the language. Now, the problem with a lot of upper middle class people of my generation is our mother tongues have slid into the background of our lives because everyone's too busy with English. And a few things were happening at that time. I had written my first collection of short stories, The Gurkha's Daughter, and I tried translating one of the stories there into Nepali. I failed at it. I was so bad. I was living in New York at that point, and I had gone to Queens, at a Nepali restaurant there. I picked up a Nepali paper and saw I could barely read it. You know, and I gave up on the translation in 3 or 4 days because I was calling home about 20 times a day, asking my parents for, you know, meanings of various words. They eventually ended up translating the Gurkha's Daughter, but that was fresh in my mind when I was writing Land Where I Flee. So what is the best way I can pay homage to my language without writing in it? Because writing in it would be doing disservice to the language. So I write about Nepali, the language, in English. I write about the onomatopoeic deliciousness that Nepali is full of. You know, we sit tachaka, we spit pyacha, we laugh galalalala. You know, and I haven't come across any other language in the world that is as rich in onomatopoeia. So I do that. And I've also noticed, and you know, I apologize for the crassness here, but I mean, there are some Nepali words, there are Nepali cuss words that are so delicious, they're so satisfying. You know, I mean, and to translate them into English is futile. I mean, so much gets lost in the process. So I've used Prasanthi, my character in the book, who loves peppering her speech with various words, you know, one of which is kondo. Okay, a word that means nothing to nothing to anyone here. Now, kondo is the Nepali word for but. It straddles between grudging acceptance in some families and downright intolerance in others. I would use the word with my siblings, but not with my parents. I would use the word with my friends, but not with my teachers. Prashanti, on the other hand, loves using the word as noun, verb, adverb, adjective, everything she can. And, you know, that I guess, you know, that makes her even more interesting than she already is. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, because I wanted to bring that out about the language, but thank you. And I'm just going to turn to Janice.
Yes.
The language of love, I mean, that's a metaphor, but also there's a great sense of poetry in your writing. And you mentioned something about how it came to you. So I want to understand how that language sprang, or share it with us.
Well, it's interesting because I've had sort of the almost diametrically opposite journey to Prajwal here, because my first book, Boats on Land, was very rooted to the place that I come from. So the little bit of India that sticks out on the side, the northeast. It was peppered with Khasi words that I didn't feel the need to explain to anyone. There was no glossary, there were no footnotes. They were just there because those stories sprang from that place. With Nine-Chambered Heart, I was trying to do something completely different. I was trying to look at which stories survive a loosening from geographical anchorage. What stories float easily over borders? And think of fairy tales, 1001 Nights, our myths. They lie lightly in a way. And I was really interested in trying to figure out what kind of story would survive that telling. So my language with the Nine-Chambered Heart tries to be light, to sit lightly on our tongues so that it can travel in a way across borders.
And it's what I also felt I was capturing also was this lovely sense of music and the cadence. And do you think the theme influences that?
I feel like that could actually stem from my regional language back in India, from Khasi.
Yeah.
Khasi was always an oral language. It never had a script, which means our reservoirs of history were songs and poems and theatre and folk tales, oral folk tales. And until the British missionaries came and found, well, we need to translate the Bible into something. So they gave us a script, which has changed the fabric of the language quite a lot. But the love for music remains, and I think that will always linger. I don't think that I can quite ever extricate that away.
I hope you don't.
Beautiful. I hope you don't. Yeah, and it's also when you do buy the book, you'll notice how the sentences also are placed on the page. You'll have one long sentence, then a short one. So it literally looks. I don't read music, but having worked a lot with musicians for their sins, it just spreads itself like that. And so when you read it in your head, with my own sort of oral tradition background, it really sings, and really great credit to you. So I wanted to tease that out. Was it more the theme of this being about love that influences that, but it's your own other tradition?
I feel like by the end of it, it becomes both.
Yes, and that's how it has
and that's how it comes together.
Yeah. So we've had from Northeast, we've had from North, and with you, Bulbul, how you've got a lovely sense of joviality, and and I think, you know, you're a great listener as well. I think, being a painter, aren't you?
I'm not very sure I'm a listener because I have a lot of very supportive friends and family here, and I better not say anything, but they might get up and immediately say no. Like I don't know if you speak Hindi, any of you here. In Hindi movies, there's always a sort of scene where say "Ye shaadi nahi hogi," you know. So it's that kind of, my writing. I sort of came very accidentally. I became a writer accidentally because I was a painter, and I used to do this sort of a sketch, a charcoal sketch for a newspaper, and of people who made a living from working on the streets of Delhi. You know, seasonal workers would come. For instance, we have these trees called jamun. What is jamun in English?
It gets lost in translation.
Yeah, there's no
it's
such
a big
equivalent.
Purple fruit, and as children we used to suck it because that was our form of lipstick.
Jamun is actually the fruit India was named after in ancient time, Jambudi. So I would sketch them, and then, you know, they would publish it. And these people would tell me incredible stories about why they would come to Delhi, why they worked only for 2 months, and what they did when they went back to their villages. And I told my editor, I said, these are fascinating stories about their life and lives, and why doesn't somebody write about them? So the editor said, you know, nobody's got time to waste on, you know, people, sort of ordinary people working on the street. Why don't you do it? You know, you're just sitting there and sketching them. In any case, you're wasting your time, in other words. So that's how I started writing. And I wrote a column for many years about these people who'd come and work. And it was very sort of, it just somebody at Rupa Books read those and asked me to write a book about these people, which of course never happened because at that point I was going to Calcutta for a wedding, my cousin's father's wedding, I think, my niece's father's wedding. And I told my editor about this wedding and how we were preparing. There were 7 of us in this train, and they were already fighting about who's going to carry what kind of parathas and who's not going to eat, who's going to be fasting that day, and it was chaos. So when I told him about this, he says, why don't you write about your aunts? And my aunts have never left me. I've been writing, I've written like, I don't know what, 18 or 19 books, and these wretched aunts are there in every book. This is the first book I've done, the murder mystery, with no aunts. So let's see how it does.
Because you have a great ear, and you know, even the think clouds, they're so evocative, and they really make for your characters. You know, you've got Russians, you've got sirens, you've got, you know, a young Goan woman, you've got beauticians, you've got actually the young child figure. She sort of takes, you know, is able to play more of the detective work from the kitchen. So it's a wonderful jostling of, you know, different sort of, well, different levels and classes of people working in this this old home, which indeed, in Prajwal's novel, because you've got this matriarch, if I can call her that, and again, you know, weddings and this particular ceremony, which you all call Chaurasi, you know, in India we tend to call it Shashti Purti, which is either the 60th year of your life, or indeed the 60th wedding anniversary if 2 people are alive. And you have very articulately mentioned that the numerology of it, which is that person would have witnessed 1008 full moons, so they're well worth the L'Oreal hair color and the wisdom. But so, you know, it's wonderful how we enter into characters or we listen to them. For me, I find that most gratifying. Maybe that's my theatre background, but I think it brings it alive, and I love the way you've dealt with it in a different sort of person. I was just wondering, a good way to possibly get into our next sections of reading is, first, if each one of you would like to just, maybe starting with Janice, how did you get to that title?
Ah, stolen. One of my inspirations for the book, or one of my strong influences for the book was Anaya Nin, who was a Cuban-American writer, and she has a book called Spy in the House of Love, yes, which talks about Sabine, who's the central woman, the character there, and she talks about herself as a painting, as a cubist painting made up of many parts. And that really stayed with me. And another one of Anaya Nin's novels was called The Four-Chambered Heart. And it just struck me as something that I could use and sort of, you know, cherish.
Did your cat influence the Nine-Chambered Heart?
The cat came after, but did help me finish the novel.
Okay, good. Okay, so that's how you got, and
yes, and
because in a way you've, I don't know if you call them chapters or characters, because it's sort
voices.
of voices. It sort of runs like Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy.
Yes.
So do you want to just enumerate what the...
I think that was part of the challenge or the attempt to lighten the book, to leave it geographically unanchored. So the voices are clubbed into sections that are named the saint, the lighthouse keeper, the sailor, the professor, the poet, the undertaker. So we have no names. We have cities with rivers and cities without rivers, cities with bridges and cities by the sea. And so it's my attempt to make it almost like a fable, yes, a modern day fable.
Yeah. It was also reminding me of, you know, that a great loss to filmmaking, in my opinion, Chris Kieslowski's Ten Commandments. Yeah, it was
right,
sort of, it had that quality of, I mean, it sounds 10 Commandments and you're thinking, what am I going into watching on a Sunday night? But really looking at those very contemporary moments and just a sliver of reality into which something blurs and something goes in a direction that was not planned and changes a life completely. You know,
yes,
it's that very great. Thank you. And Prajwal, title?
Well, my first book was called The Gurkha's Daughter. I mean, that's so direct, right? There's I needed some sexiness in the title of the next book, and because the characters in my book are constantly fleeing, they're either, you know, moving to the West for better economic opportunities, or they've been kicked out of their kingdoms, or, you know, they've been kicked out of their countries, or they're fleeing the demons in their heads. You know, I decided on something along the lines of the land where I flee from, or the land where I flee to, and then, you know, decided to do away with the from and to, and also did away with the, because why not be ungrammatical when you can, right? So that's how Land Where I Flee happened. And I guess it was a reaction to a title like The Gurkha's Daughter, you know, which I now realize is a really good title. You know, The Gurkha's Daughter. I mean, it's the kind of book that anybody who travels to Nepal or to the Northeast or to the Nepali-speaking world picks up simply by virtue of its title. But there's no mystery. There's no, you know, there's nothing there. I mean, that's how
I mean, it's interesting that, you know, just when you place Gurkha, it has so many interpretations and contexts. both in India as well as in Britain.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so it was great. But I love the mystery of this. And is this an Indian cover, or because I don't know, as you've traveled through the world?
That is the British cover.
Okay, so
I
you
have
to
an
change it.
American cover which is as loud and obnoxious as American covers can be. So there you go.
Not bad.
I know. Look at that. I don't know.
But I kind of feel this makes this something great. I love the sense of the suitcase and.
I'm guessing this would
Punching
stand out in a bookstore.
Oh.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Main thing is you buy it here. And what did the title, was the title in your head before you started writing, or what were you, was it
Well,
always
actually,
going to be a
this
murder?
title is really very easy because I saw it written on a board. So I just added the happy.
Tell us more.
May I tell you about the next book? Because
Okay.
which is coming out. In fact, I wrote it 4 years ago, but for some reason, publishers decided to bring it 1 month after this, and both my editors are quarreling now. So that's called Love and Learning Under the Magnolia. Now that's a title I'm very proud of. It's my title, and the editor did not take it away. You know, very often they don't like your title as a rubbish. You don't want this, but so that's a title. And the titles actually make such a lot of difference. I wrote a collection of short stories many years ago called Anger of Aubergines. And it's, you know, a lot of people know me as the aubergine lady. They've forgotten my name. But they, you know, and it's been translated into many languages. In every language, they only remember me as the aubergine lady.
Love it.
The title's, you know, like you said, Gurkha's Daughter. It's simple, but it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really hits the spot. So this is a great time now to open your books and read us another little section. Can I start with Bulbul first?
I actually should. I forgot to tell you that, you know, this, the characters are in this old people's home in Goa, but the person who gets murdered is somebody from outside, because I couldn't bear to kill any of my friends in Goa. So it's all the people from Delhi, and it's actually a real thing happening, because people in Goa are very laid back, as you know, and gentle and kind and generous, and they've got these hordes coming from north who are pretty aggressive. I mean, I live in Delhi, and they come, and as soon as they what should I say, like the Vikings, they've all come in. They brought their tandoori chicken with them. They bought chaat shops, and it's all getting very Punjabi-fied. You know, Punjab is where they come from, and they love their own food. They see their own movies. They listen to their own music. They don't want to do anything.
So it's become a kind of a colony.
Yeah, of Punjab. So I just wanted one of them dead. So, and every time somebody in Goa asks me, oh, you're from the north, you're from Delhi, I said, yes, but I'm Bengali. You know? And they're very happy, and they're my friends. So this, and of course, my children are half Punjabi, so they're a bit upset about this. And I won't tell you who the murderer is, but that's for you to find out. Unfortunately, this book hasn't arrived as yet. It's got a life of its own. It's somewhere, God knows where. But you can order it on Amazon.
The detectives are
The
chasing
detectives
it.
actually. Yeah, I know. Maybe the Punjabis have sabotaged,
Boycotted it.
it. So, and of course, there's a lot of Russians in Goa. Lots of Russians. You know, surprisingly, they have their own beach. I speak Russian, so, you know, I make friends with some of them, and they talk to me about it. And they said they've never been so happy. They don't want to go back. And some of them are selling, you know, necklaces. I have a Russian carpenter who comes and, you know, does beautiful furniture. So it's quite a strange sort of place, Goa now. Okay. Morjim Beach stretched far and deep into the curve of the land, forming a graceful crescent, like a new moon emerging from the sea. It was a quiet beach, not as crowded as the more popular beaches in Candolim and Kalingut, filled with rubber-slippered and sun-hatted tourists. For some reason, people from outside Goa began to behave in a raucous manner as soon as they landed here. Mild-mannered accountants from Bombay, sullen shopkeepers and their jolly wives from Delhi, and sleek young techies from Bengaluru, wired to their laptops, all turned into bawdy, loud holidaymakers in the blink of an eye. The locals would watch in dismay, and some would even grumble. These people bring money. We have to put up with them, they would say, shrugging their shoulders. But do they have to be like this? The new houses on the hills near the Shapora River had made the people of Trionim unhappy, but they had no choice. The builder from Delhi, Rana Huda, was rich and powerful, and he knew all the important people in the city. As Maria drove past the building site, she suddenly remembered Francis talking about Rana. He is really loaded. You should invite him to the Tip-Top Cafe one day. He will bring all the other rich tourists with him from Delhi. She was surprised that Francis knew him so well. She reached the cafe, parked in a small space under a tree. It was an old tune. The cafe was crowded today with a lot of young college students, and someone was playing a guitar. The others looked at her in surprise and began to sing. Soon the cafe was alive with their voices, and even the lone waiter stopped in his service and joined in. I will just skip a little bit, and this Russian enters, okay? Then she saw the girl. The boys had seen her too and stopped in their tracks. She was a tall, blonde girl. Her golden hair seemed to make ripples in the breeze. She stood in the middle of the road looking like a mermaid who just emerged from the sea in shiny blue lycra pants and a loose, transparent shirt. She was the most beautiful girl Maria had ever seen, like the golden-haired doll she had once seen in a toy shop, an expensive doll with blue eyes and golden curls. "Excuse me, are you Maria from the Happy Home?" asked the girl, coming forward. "Yes, I am. Is that your car? It's blocking my way." Maria suddenly felt irritated with the girl's stunning good looks. It was not fair to be so beautiful. "I'm sure she's very dumb and has bad breath." Maria gave the girl a cold, unfriendly look. "I'm Olga. I'm so happy to meet you at last. I'm a very good friend of Yuri who's staying in your happy home." She smiled. The blue eyes crinkled slightly and sparkled as she extended her hands to Maria. She had a squeaky, high-pitched voice and yellow, stained teeth. The ethereal mermaid vibe vanished as soon as she spoke, and she looked like a pretty girl in the sunshine and nothing more.
Wonderful. Thank you. It could be Salisbury, folks, so, try a new location. Yeah. Do you want to read?
We have 10 minutes. Should Janice read? Her book came out 2 weeks ago, and
Yes.
my book has been around for 3 or 4 years.
That's
Generous
lovely.
man.
Wonderful. Come on, Janice. Yes.
Beers on me.
Thank you.
Okay, very short. A section from The Florist. How do I tell you this is not love? It isn't. It cannot be. If I'd known, I wouldn't have walked into that pub. No, that's not true. I would have walked into that pub and watched you and slipped away quietly. This is also untrue. I'm not the kind to think too much about anything. I like surfing and motorbikes and drinking beer with my friends on weekends. I work with machines. The only books I read are self-help books, the ones about cheese or something. My parents are divorced. I'm close to my mother. I have an elder sister and a dog at home. Once a year, I take a holiday during summer. When I find the one I want to marry, I will take her away and propose to her on a gondola. That's my idea of romance, and that's really all there is to know about me. But believe me when I say I will not forget you. I do not love you, but I will not forget you. How can I? For a few days, it's true, you lifted me out of myself. It's one of those afternoons, much like this, when you can really feel it's building up to the hottest time of the year. The tourists are going crazy, and so are the hawkers. Queues wind for miles outside every sightseeing spot in the city. But it's Saturday. I'm happy to be off work. I have the weekend to myself. I've come to watch tennis at the only place in the city that's showing the match, this English pub, or an English pub as it's imagined to be here on the continent. There aren't many people inside. Most people come to this city to see art and architecture, and a couple of guys hitting a ball over a net isn't on their agenda. You are sitting at the bar. In a white dress with pale blue flowers, your feet are clad in summer sandals, your hair falls to your shoulders, your arms are tanned and bare. Sitting, you appear small. Before you, a pint, a bowl of crisps. You have your back to me, you're watching the match intently. I cannot see your face. At first, I'm intrigued because you're the only woman here, and I wonder if you are beautiful. If you have a face I will not forget. Then you turn to the bartender. Your cheeks are flushed as if you've been out in the sun too long, but your eyes are wide and bold and dark as nights that carry promise. You glance around the pub at the other two men watching the game, and then you look at me. You look a moment and you smile.
To read. Yes, we've got 5 minutes.
Prasanti. Let's listen to Prasanti.
Yes, that opening is.
Yeah, so I'm intrigued by it.
Okay, so, you know, I talked about how I took every South Asian taboo and decided to have a blast with it. So this is the caste taboo. You know, it's one of the granddaughters has gotten married to a quote-unquote untouchable, lower caste. She lives in Boulder, Colorado, has just been fired from her job, and comes home and, you know, to find a husband who is sincerely preparing for a job interview. And, you know, she looks at her husband, and this is a reflection, okay? How ironic it was that her husband, an untouchable, the lowest of the low castes, an upsetting byproduct of the heinous system that her ancestors had helped create and propagate, should be so full of piety. He knew their shlokas, memorized elliptical Sanskrit mantras, read the Gita, and understood what festival was celebrated for what reason. He was combative when she, a Brahmin, dismissed Hinduism's many superstitions, made her analyze and reanalyze these beliefs, and furnished her with the scientific reasoning behind them. And yet, he could never become a priest. He would never be allowed near the altar of most Hindus. He was a casualty of Hinduism who had chosen not to be a victim. An untouchable who had no shame about his low caste, as much as he did of robbing his Brahmin wife of hers on account of her marriage to him. A bigger Hindu, a better Hindu than she or anyone she knew. Ram Bahadur Damai, whose kind the Christian missionaries had been targeting for centuries, and whose family had stood firm in their devotion to Hinduism, naming their child after a Hindu god. Ram Bahadur Damai, of the Taylor caste, the father of a half-caste children, who would carry in their bloodline accusations of incest and consanguinity. Ram Bahadur Damai, responsible for the biggest blemish anyone had brought in a family, for belonging to a family of tailors, of alterers and cutters, for altering family dynamics in a way that could never be unaltered, for ripping grandmother from granddaughter in a way they could never be rehemmed. Ram Bahadur Damai, who gave her 2 sons in whose DNA were Damai blood and Brahmin blood, one infiltrating another, poisoning another, the 2 sons her grandmother would never touch, whose presence would desecrate her ancestral house. Ram Bahadur Damai was a better human being than any of her family members would ever be. And as her husband stood in front of the makeshift altar, sonorously reciting the Gayatri mantra, the Hanuman Chalisa, and the Ganesha mantra, chants coined by the very Brahmins who had determined his legacy and his sons' and grandsons' legacy. Bhagwati Nopani Damai, with a bell oscillating in frenzy in one hand, prayed the hardest she had in 37 years. For a long period, she had put off thinking about the enormity of the impending reunion, but it was here now. She would be seeing her grandmother after 18 years, for the first time since the elopement, and she needed to fortify herself with all the prayers of all the religions in the world.
So, ladies and gentlemen, and what a wonderful audience you've been. Please give a fantastic round of applause to them and to yourselves. And really, you know, without going into too much of anatomical technicalities about fiction, I'm sure you feel with these excellent readings, their titles, their sense of character, their language, their purposes, their intentions, and indeed their manifestations on the page, you are much wiser about fiction than before you entered this space. So thank you very much for your attention.